They laughed because they thought she was powerless, but before the night was over, every person in that restaurant would learn a lesson about dignity they would never forget. Maya Carter balanced a silver tray against her shoulder as she moved carefully through the crowded dining room of the Imperial Room, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light across polished marble floors, and the quiet hum of wealthy conversations floated through the air like expensive perfume. At 27 years old, Maya had mastered the art of becoming invisible. Invisible servers received fewer complaints, fewer insults, and usually made it through their shifts without trouble. Tonight, however, trouble was waiting at table 12. The laughter reached her before she arrived. Sharp, loud, attention-seeking laughter. The kind that demanded an audience. Madison Sinclair sat at the center of a table, surrounded by friends dressed in designer clothes and confidence purchased long before they entered adulthood. It was her birthday celebration, and she seemed determined to make sure the entire restaurant knew it. Maya approached with a professional smile. "Good evening, everyone. May I refill your champagne?" Madison barely looked at her. "About time," she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. Her friends chuckled. Maya ignored the remark. She had heard worse. She carefully lifted the bottle and began pouring. Then someone at the table suddenly pushed back their chair. The movement startled her. A few drops of champagne splashed onto the white tablecloth beside Madison's glass. Silence fell over the table for half a second. Then Madison slowly looked down at the tiny droplets. Her expression hardened as if Maya had committed some unforgivable offense. "Are you serious?" Madison said loudly. Nearby diners turned their heads. Maya immediately reached for a napkin. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Let me clean that right away." "Unbelievable," Madison scoffed. "Do they hire anyone now?" More laughter followed. Maya felt heat creep into her cheeks, but continued wiping the table. "It was an accident," one of Madison's friends said with a smirk. "Maybe she just isn't used to serving people like us." The group laughed harder. Maya lowered her eyes. She knew better than to argue. Rent was due in 4 days. Her mother's medical bills were stacked on the kitchen counter. Pride didn't pay hospital invoices. Across the restaurant, seated alone in a private corner booth, Ethan Kong looked up from his untouched dinner. Most people saw a sharply dressed businessman enjoying a quiet evening. Few recognized one of the most influential men in Chicago's Korean business community. Even fewer understood the power he carried without ever raising his voice. Ethan's dark eyes settled on the scene unfolding across the room. He watched the waitress. He watched the rich girl. Most importantly, he watched how everyone else reacted. Back at table 12, Madison leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You know what?" she announced loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "People like you should be grateful just to be here." The laughter returned. Maya's fingers tightened around the damp napkin. For a moment, she looked as though she might say something. Instead, she simply nodded. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am." Madison smiled triumphantly. The room relaxed. The show was apparently over. But from the corner booth, Ethan Kong continued watching. Because unlike everyone else in the restaurant, he wasn't looking at the humiliation. He was looking at the woman enduring it. And something about Maya Carter's quiet dignity made him remember a rainy night 3 months earlier that he had never forgot. 3 months earlier, rain had fallen over Chicago in thick silver sheets, turning sidewalks into mirrors and washing the city in reflections of neon and headlights. Most people hurried past one another with their heads down, focused only on reaching somewhere warm and dry. Maya Carter was no different. She had just finished a 12-hour shift at a diner on the South Side and was walking toward a bus stop with aching feet and a paper bag containing the sandwich she planned to save for dinner. Every dollar mattered. Every meal mattered. The wind pushed cold rain against her jacket as she crossed a nearly empty side street. That was when she noticed him. A man sat alone on a bench beneath a flickering street lamp. His dark coat was soaked through, and despite the expensive watch visible beneath his sleeve, he looked strangely out of place. Not lost exactly. More like someone carrying a weight no one else could see. Most people would have kept walking. Maya almost did. She had enough problems of her own. Her mother needed medication. Rent was increasing again. Her savings account barely existed. Yet something about the man's expression stopped her. It was not weakness. It was exhaustion, the kind that reached beyond the body. Maya hesitated before stepping toward the bench. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked gently. The man looked up. His dark eyes studied her with surprise, as if kindness from a stranger was something unfamiliar. I am fine, he replied. Just tired. Maya glanced at the ring. You do not look fine. The corners of his mouth almost formed a smile. Almost. She opened her paper bag and pulled out the sandwich she had been saving all day. It was nothing special. Turkey, cheese, and bread from a convenience store. For a moment she looked at it, silently calculating. Then she handed it to him. Take it. The man frowned. That is your dinner. Maya shrugged. Then I guess tonight we both need something else more. He stared at the sandwich, but did not immediately take it. Few people had ever offered him anything without wanting something in return. Maya did not know his name. She did not ask what kind of car he drove or what he did for a living. She simply saw another human being sitting alone in the ring. Finally, he accepted it. Thank you. You are welcome. Maya smiled. And next time, find somewhere indoors. Nobody should sit out here in weather like this. A bus pulled up moments later. Maya climbed aboard without looking back. She never noticed the black luxury SUV parked across the street. She never noticed the concerned driver watching from inside. And she certainly never noticed the way the man on the bench continued staring after the departing bus long after it disappeared into the ring. Ethan Kong remembered every second of that encounter. Not because of the sandwich, not because of the conversation, but because in a city filled with people trying to get ahead, Maya Carter had stopped for someone who could offer her nothing. Back in the restaurant, Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the waitress standing beside table 12. Around her, expensive laughter filled the room once again. But Ethan was no longer seeing the uniform. He was seeing the woman who had shared her only meal with a stranger and walked away expecting nothing in return. Maya Carter never spoke about her struggles unless someone forced her to. Most people who met her at the Imperial Room assumed she was simply another server carrying trays between tables and smiling through long shifts. They never saw the alarm clock ringing at 5:30 every morning. They never saw the tiny apartment on the west side of Chicago where she lived with her mother. They never saw the stack of medical statements tucked inside a kitchen drawer that Maya opened only when she absolutely had to. Every month felt like a race she could not afford to lose. Her mother, Evelyn Carter, had spent most of her life taking care of other people. She had worked in schools, churches, and community centers for more than 30 years. Now arthritis made even simple movements painful, and a chronic kidney condition required constant treatment. Maya often watched her mother smile through discomfort because she did not want her daughter to worry. That only made Maya work harder. During the day, she worked at the restaurant. On weekends, she helped cater private events. Whenever she could find extra hours, she accepted them without complaint. Sleep became a luxury rather than a necessity. Yet somehow she still found reasons to be kind. Earlier that same morning, before her shift at the Imperial Room had even begun, Maya had stopped at a grocery store on her way home from another job. While standing in line, she noticed an elderly man struggling to count enough money for a few basic items. The cashier looked impatient. The customers behind him sighed loudly. Without hesitation, Maya quietly paid the difference and left before the man could properly thank her. It was not because she had extra money. She certainly did not. It was because she understood what it felt like to stand in public while people measured your worth by what you lacked. That was who Maya Carter was when nobody was watching. Back inside the restaurant, she returned to her duties despite the humiliation from table 12. Her smile was smaller now, but it remained. She refilled water glasses, delivered meals, thanked customers for their patience. Across the dining room, Madison Sinclair and her friends continued enjoying the attention they generated. Every laugh seemed louder than necessary. Every comment carried the confidence of people who had never worried about choosing between groceries and medication. Ethan Kong noticed the difference immediately. He had spent years surrounded by powerful individuals. Wealth, influence, and status rarely impressed him anymore. Character did. And the more he watched Maya, the more unusual she seemed. Most people who experienced public embarrassment became defensive, angry, or bitter. Maya became quieter, but not cruel. She continued treating every customer with the same respect she had shown before. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. The restaurant lights reflected against polished glass and silver cutlery. Around him, conversations flowed normally as though nothing significant had happened. Yet he could feel something shifting beneath the surface. Madison believed the evening belonged to her. Her friends believed the entertainment was over. Maya believed enduring the moment would protect her job. Only Ethan sensed that the night was moving towards something none of them expected. And as he watched Maya walk past his table carrying another tray, he realized he was no longer observing out of curiosity. He was watching because he wanted to know how much dignity one person could carry before the world finally noticed it. The dinner rush should have drowned out the tension, but somehow it only amplified it. Every clink of silverware, every burst of laughter, every quiet conversation seemed to circle back toward table 12. Madison Sinclair had discovered something dangerous that evening. She had discovered that people were watching her. And like many people who mistake attention for admiration, she wanted more. Maya carried a tray of desserts from the kitchen, moving carefully between crowded tables. The scent of chocolate and vanilla drifted through the air as she approached Madison's group. The celebration had grown louder with each passing minute. Empty glasses reflected the chandelier light. Expensive handbags rested on neighboring chairs. Phones appeared more frequently now, recording moments for social media. Maya gently placed a dessert in front of Madison. "Your birthday cake, ma'am." Madison barely glanced at it. Her attention was fixed on one of her friends who was scrolling through videos on her phone. Then her eyes returned to Maya. A slow smile appeared. It was the kind of smile that made people uncomfortable before they even understood why. "Wait," Madison said loudly. "Before you leave." Maya stopped. "Yes, ma'am." Several nearby diners looked over again. Madison picked up a fork and pointed it casually toward Maya's uniform. "Tell me something. Do you actually enjoy this job?" The question sounded harmless. The tone was not. Maya kept her expression neutral. "I am grateful to have work." A few people at the table snickered. Madison leaned back. "That was not what I asked." More laughter followed. Maya remained silent. Experience had taught her that some questions were traps disguised as conversations. Madison's friend raised her phone slightly, already recording. "Come on," Madison pressed. "You can be honest. If somebody handed you $1 million right now, you would quit tomorrow, right?" The table erupted in amusement. Maya offered a polite smile. "Most people probably would." "Exactly," Madison said. "Because nobody dreams of being a waitress." Her friends nodded in agreement. Ethan Kong watched from across the room. His expression never changed, yet his attention sharpened. He noticed something others missed. Maya was not embarrassed by her work. She was embarrassed by being treated as though her work made her less valuable than everyone else in the room. There was a difference. Madison continued speaking. "You know what fascinates me?" she asked. "People always talk about following their dreams, but some people never seem to get anywhere." The words hung in the air. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even some members of Madison's own group seemed uncertain now. Maya lowered her eyes for a moment. Not out of shame, out of restraint. She thought about her mother waiting at home. She thought about medical appointments, rent, groceries, responsibilities, things Madison had probably never worried about. Finally, Maya answered softly. "Success means different things to different people." For the first time all evening, the laughter faded. The answer was simple, respectful, impossible to mock without appearing cruel. Madison's smile tightened. She had expected frustration. She had expected tears. Instead, she found composure. And for reasons she could not explain, that seemed to irritate her even more. Across the restaurant, Ethan folded his hands together and continued watching in silence. Because he had begun to realize something important. The real test of character was no longer about Maya. It was about how far Madison Sinclair was willing to go before someone finally told her to stop. The atmosphere around table 12 shifted in a way that even the other guests could feel. What had started as careless teasing was becoming something else entirely. Madison Sinclair sensed it too, but instead of pulling back, she leaned into it. Some people mistake silence for weakness. Others mistake patience for permission. Madison was making both mistakes at the same time. She picked up her phone and glanced at the screen before looking back at Maya. "You know what?" she said loudly. "I think I figured out your secret." Several of her friends laughed automatically. Maya remained still. "My secret?" she asked politely. "Yes," Madison replied. "You are one of those people who pretends to be happy because admitting the truth would be embarrassing." A few uncomfortable looks passed around the table. The comment landed harder than the others because it was designed to. It was no longer about spilled champagne or customer service. It was about dignity. Maya felt every eye in the restaurant drifting toward her. She could have walked. Away. She could have called a manager. Instead, she answered with the same calm voice she had maintained all evening. I do not think happiness depends on what job someone has. Madison laughed. That sounds exactly like something a person would say when they have no better options. Her friends laughed again, but this time the sound felt forced. Even they seemed to realize the line had been crossed. Across the dining room, Ethan Kong never looked away. He noticed something unusual happening among the surrounding guests. Earlier, they had watched with curiosity. Now many watched with discomfort. The crowd was changing sides, even if they had not admitted it yet. Character has a way of revealing itself under pressure. So does cruelty. Madison reached into her designer handbag and removed a crisp $100 bill. She held it between two fingers as though it weighed nothing. Tell you what, she said. Since you work so hard, maybe I should help you out. The room grew quieter. Maya's stomach tightened. She already knew where this was heading. Madison casually dropped the bill onto the floor beside her chair. There you go. Several people froze. Even the music seemed quieter somehow. Maya stared at the bill for a moment. Not because of the money, because of what the gesture meant. Madison smiled. Come on, pick it up. No one laughed this time. The silence spreading through the restaurant felt heavier than any insult. Maya thought about her mother sitting at home. She thought about the overdue utility bill waiting on the kitchen counter. $100 could buy groceries. It could help with medication. It could solve real problems. Yet somehow the bill on the floor felt more expensive than anything she had ever seen. Slowly, Maya lifted her eyes and met Madison's gaze. For the first time all evening, there was sadness in her expression. Not anger, not humiliation, sadness. As though she genuinely felt sorry for someone who believed money gave them the right to diminish another human being. And at that exact moment, from the corner booth, Ethan Kong quietly pushed back his chair. The sound of Ethan Kang's chair moving across the polished floor was not loud, yet somehow it carried through the entire restaurant. Conversations faded. Forks paused halfway to plates. Even Madison Sinclair's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. There was something about the man approaching that demanded attention without asking for it. Ethan walked calmly toward table 12, his expression unreadable. His dark suit was perfectly tailored, his posture relaxed, but the atmosphere around him seemed to change with every step. Maya recognized him immediately as the quiet guest from the corner booth. She assumed he was simply another customer who had witnessed the uncomfortable scene. What she did not understand was why the restaurant manager had suddenly gone pale. Ethan stopped beside the table and looked down at the $100 bill lying on the floor. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then, without any sign of anger, he bent down and picked it up. Madison straightened in her chair. Thank you, she said with a smug smile. I was wondering if someone would finally help her. Ethan studied the bill briefly before turning his attention toward Madison. Help her, he asked quietly. The question sounded simple, yet something about it made Madison uneasy. Well, obviously, she replied. I was being generous. Ethan glanced toward Maya. She remained standing silently beside the table, refusing to defend herself, refusing to attack anyone else. The same quiet dignity he remembered from that rainy night. Ethan looked back at Madison. Generosity is usually offered with respect. A few nearby guests lowered their eyes. Others watched with growing interest. Madison laughed nervously. Look, I was only joking. Were you? Ethan asked. The smile disappeared from her face. For the first time all evening, she seemed uncertain. Ethan carefully placed the bill on the table in front of her. Money is valuable, he said, but character is worth much more. Unfortunately, one is easier to inherit than the other. The silence that followed felt enormous. Several members of Madison's group shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One quietly lowered her phone. Another suddenly became fascinated by the dessert plate in front of him. Ethan continued speaking in the same calm tone. He never raised his voice. He did not need to. You asked whether she enjoys her job. You laughed at her answers. You treated her kindness as weakness. His gaze briefly moved toward Maya. Yet throughout this entire evening, she has shown more grace than anyone at this table. Madison opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. Around the restaurant, people were no longer watching Maya. They were watching her. For the first time, she stood where Maya had been standing all night. Under judgment. Under scrutiny. Ethan folded his hands in front of him. The real measure of a person is not how they treat those above them. It is how they treat those they believe cannot benefit them. The room became perfectly still. Maya felt her heart racing. She had expected another insult, another humiliation. She had not expected someone to stand beside her. And as she looked at Ethan Kong, she noticed something familiar in his eyes. A memory she could not quite place. A rainy street. A stranger on a bench. A forgotten act of kindness. Then Ethan turned toward the manager, who was now standing frozen near the service station, and said 5 words that instantly changed everything. I believe introductions are overdue. The manager swallowed hard and hurried toward the table so quickly that several employees exchanged confused glances. Until that moment, most guests had assumed Ethan Kong was simply another wealthy customer. The manager's reaction suggested something very different. "Mr. Kong," the manager said respectfully, stopping beside him. "Is there anything you need?" A ripple moved through the dining room. Madison frowned. The confidence she had worn all evening was beginning to crack. Ethan nodded slightly. "Actually, there is." He turned toward Maya. "Do you remember a rainy evening 3 months ago?" Maya blinked. The question caught her completely off guard. "I am sorry." Ethan's expression softened for the first time that night. "You were walking home after work. You stopped to speak with a stranger sitting alone in the rain." Suddenly, the memory returned. The bench. The storm. The exhausted man she had given her sandwich to. Maya stared at him in disbelief. "That was you." Ethan nodded. Around them, every conversation in the restaurant had stopped. Madison looked from Ethan to Maya and back again, trying to understand what was happening. Ethan continued. "You did not know who I was. You did not ask for anything. You gave away the only meal you had because you thought another person needed it more." Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had never expected to see that stranger again. "It was just a sandwich," she said quietly. Ethan almost smiled. "No, it was kindness. There is a difference." The room fell silent again. Some guests lowered their eyes. Others watched Maya with entirely new expressions. The woman they had seen as a waitress moments earlier now seemed much larger than the role she carried. Madison shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Wait," she said. "You know her?" Ethan looked toward her. "I know enough." Then he turned back to the manager. "Perhaps you should explain who owns this restaurant." The manager looked nervous. "The Imperial Room is part of the Kong Hospitality Group." A murmur swept through the dining room. Several guests immediately recognized the name. The company owned luxury restaurants, hotels, and entertainment venues across multiple states. Madison's face lost color. Ethan Kong was not merely a customer. He was the owner. The manager continued carefully. "Mr. Kong founded the company and serves as chairman." The silence that followed felt enormous. Madison's friends looked stunned. One slowly lowered her phone onto the table. Another stared at Ethan as though seeing him for the first time. Maya stood frozen. Even she had not known. Ethan's attention returned to Madison. His voice remained calm. "Earlier tonight, you asked whether she had accomplished anything with her life." Madison said nothing. "I have spent years meeting people with wealth, influence, and impressive resumes. Yet very few have shown the character Maya Carter displayed on a rainy night when she thought nobody was watching." Every word landed with quiet precision. Ethan glanced around the room. "The tragedy is not that some people struggle financially. The tragedy is that others become so comfortable that they stop recognizing dignity when it stands directly in front of them." Madison lowered her eyes. For the first time all evening, she had no response. And for the first time all evening, every person in the restaurant understood exactly who deserved respect. No one moved for several seconds. The dining room that had been filled with laughter now felt almost sacred in its silence. Madison Sinclair sat frozen in her chair, staring at the table as though the polished wood might somehow provide an escape. Her friends avoided eye contact. The confidence that had carried them through the evening had vanished, leaving only discomfort behind. Ethan Kong remained calm. He had not humiliated anyone. He had not raised his voice. Yet somehow the truth had accomplished what anger never could. The manager cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Kong, would you like me to handle this?" Ethan looked around the room before answering. "It has already been handled." The response surprised everyone, especially Madison. She slowly lifted her head. Ethan's attention shifted toward Maya. "People often believe justice means punishment," he said. "Sometimes it means simply allowing the truth to be seen." Maya stood quietly, unsure what to say. She had spent so many years trying not to draw attention to herself that becoming the center of the room felt almost unreal. Ethan continued. 3 months ago, Maya helped a stranger because she believed it was the right thing to do. Tonight she showed patience, professionalism, and dignity while being treated unfairly. Those qualities deserve recognition. He turned toward the manager. Effective immediately, I would like Maya enrolled in our leadership development program. Gasps spread through the restaurant. Several employees looked stunned. The program was known throughout the company. It was designed to identify future managers and executives. Very few people were selected. Maya blinked in disbelief. Sir, I do not know what to say. Ethan gave a small smile. You do not need to say anything. You already showed us who you are. The manager nodded enthusiastically. Congratulations, Maya. Around the room, employees, who had worked beside her for months, began smiling. Some quietly applauded. Others looked genuinely proud. For the first time all evening, Maya felt something she had not expected to feel. Not relief. Not victory. Respect. Real respect. Madison watched the scene unfold with growing shame. The attention she had wanted for herself now belonged entirely to the woman she had tried to diminish. Ethan finally looked toward her one last time. Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity. Wealth does not create value. Character does. Madison lowered her eyes. There was nothing left to argue. The lesson had already been delivered. Slowly, applause began from one corner of the room. Then another. Within moments, much of the restaurant joined in. Maya's eyes filled with tears she fought hard to contain. Not because of the promotion, not because of the recognition, but because after years of being overlooked, people were finally seeing her. And standing in the center of the dining room surrounded by strangers, Maya Carter realized that the most powerful gift someone can receive is not money, opportunity, or status. It is being reminded that your dignity was never something anyone else had the right to take away. 6 months later, the first warm days of spring arrived in Chicago, bringing sunlight that spilled across the city like a promise of new beginnings. Maya Carter stood near the entrance of a newly opened Kong hospitality restaurant, adjusting the sleeve of her Navy management jacket and taking a slow breath. The journey had not been easy. The leadership program had challenged her in ways she never expected. There had been long nights studying operations, customer service strategies, budgeting systems, and team development. There had been moments of doubt and exhaustion, but there had also been growth. The woman who once tried to disappear into the background now led teams with confidence and compassion. More importantly, life at home had changed as well. Her mother's health had improved. Regular treatments were no longer a source of constant fear. Bills that once sat unopened on the kitchen counter had been replaced by something unfamiliar, stability. Yet despite everything that had changed, Maya remained the same person who had shared a sandwich with a stranger on a rainy evening. That morning she arrived early, greeting every employee by name and helping prepare the dining room before the official opening. She believed leadership meant serving others first. It was a lesson no classroom had taught her. As guests began arriving, excitement filled the restaurant. Community leaders, business owners, employees, and local families gathered to celebrate the opening. Maya moved through the crowd, making sure everyone felt welcome. Then she noticed a familiar figure standing near the back of the room. Ethan Kong. He was alone, dressed as simply as a man in his position ever could be. He had arrived quietly, without announcements or attention. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the celebration seemed to fade into the background. Finally, Maya walked over and smiled. You could have told me you were coming. Ethan returned the smile. And missed the opportunity to see whether you noticed? Maya laughed softly. I suppose that sounds like something you would do. They stood together for a moment, watching employees move confidently through the restaurant. Ethan nodded toward the team. They respect you. Maya looked around the room. I respect them. Ethan's smile widened slightly. That is why they follow you. The word stayed with her. Not because they came from a successful businessman. Not because they came from the owner of the company. But because they reminded her of something she had nearly forgotten during the hardest years of her life. True success was never about titles, money, or recognition. It was about remaining kind in a world that constantly tested your ability to be kind. As the celebration continued, Ethan prepared to leave. Before he did, he paused beside the entrance and looked back. Maya was helping a nervous new employee carry a tray, offering encouragement with the same patience she had once shown strangers. Ethan nodded to himself. Some people changed because life rewarded them. Others remained good even before the rewards arrived. Maya had always belonged to the second group. She looked up and caught his eye one final time. No speeches were necessary. No grand gestures were needed. Just a simple nod of mutual respect between two people whose lives had crossed at exactly the right moment. And on that day, everyone in that room remembered what dignity truly looks like.